Hey everyone, welcome back to my Making a Comic Book Page video series. This is step 3, rendering. Last we left off with the line work that we did on the comic page, and now we will move forward with putting in all the blacks and detail and lighting and really finishing up the whole page. The first thing I'm considering is the light source and where all the shadows and casts will be. I use basically a thicker, heavier version of the same brush that I did for all the line work in initial phases. Later on, I'll come back with more, a different variety of art brushes and things like that. Knowing where to put shadows and placing all that is still, it's always a learning process for me. I'm still developing, still learning. I do a lot of trial and error just to see what works for me, what I think looks right. Doing this digitally kind of lets me sculpt and mold the drawing in a way because you can make such quick changes and undo as a click of a button. So, I mean, you can just really mold and shape the work until it looks right. And another nice benefit of working digitally is you can use the white brush to kind of knock out areas or cut into areas into the blacks with the white. So it makes good for making highlights and really making details pop in short time. It's something that I do all the time when I'm in this phase of the drawing. You can see I also implemented more of like a marker texture. It's like a gradiated brush stroke, and it's just another way to create texture, create more values without being so stark between the white and blacks. This is going to create like a kind of a soft overtone to the whole piece when it's finished. You'll see towards the end of this portion of the video where I will add textures and lighting effects, details, emphasis on um, different types of brushes, and all that stuff kind of helps create like dynamic visuals. And I mean, it also just makes it look interesting, in my opinion. So all of these things culminate here in the rendering phase. And I had someone ask me recently, they wanted to see what happens between the line and the rendering, because often I'll like post online the finished piece, but then I also like to show them the line work. And it's quite a big jump, I think, to see just the lines into the finished stage. And the reason why I haven't really, this is the first time I'm showing this stage, is because it can be kind of hard to show because I bounce around quite a bit when it comes to finishing up the piece. I'll jump around from doing the solid black fills to effects to laying down some texture brushes and things. So it was hard for me to figure out a good way to describe it. That's a lot of the reason why I want to make these videos. I wanted to show visually how it works and how I do it. And you'll notice by watching this video, it's sped up, but you can see that I have a pretty scratchy, pretty hectic approach to inking. It's a bit expressive, um, is how I like to see it, and it's my take on creating interesting looking visuals. The artists, like I mentioned in the previous segment, I just like Ashley Wood, Yoji Shinkawa. I really like that very expressive kind of organic, loose style. It's just something I've been always drawn to, and that's what I try to bring into my own art here. So far, each of the projects that I've taken on, I use a different art style. This is a page from my current series I'm working on called White Cell Re-Evolution, which is a sequel to the first series I ever did called White Cell Inoculation. That series was heavily inspired by artists like Yoji Shinkawa, and the style was different than what I'm doing here. But in a sense, it's still recognizable, it's still connected, and there's a difference here. I'm using a grayscale, sort of monochromatic color scheme that, despite using any real colors, it still offers more than just the solid black and white. It allows for kind of a nice mood that reflects the story well, in my opinion. I think that when you're making the decisions on what kind of color treatments or whatever, it should work well with the type of story you're writing. And I feel like this gray monochromatic is going to work well with the tone, and it's going to help create that mood that I'm really looking for. And you'll see I like to implement lighting tricks and lighting treatments, and you'll see that towards the end of this video as well. So here I'm just further rendering now. I've laid down all of my flats, and I'm coming in now with different variations of this gray that I'm using to help create, separation and create depth and things like that. And this is also the time where I start really jumping around. I just see things that catch my eye, and I just jump right to work on it. And then I kind of continue on that way all the way up until the finish. I usually try to keep my layers separated between the flats and when I start adding details, lighting effects, I do try to keep the layers separated. But since I jump back and forth so often, I find that it's almost works better for me to treat it as if it was a digital painting and I'm just working on all the highlights and shadows and just kind of go at it until I feel it looks right. And each time I begin rendering on a page, I like to at some point maybe experiment with maybe a different brush or try a different technique. And I think it's a good opportunity while you're got your head down in the pages and you're working to continue to try to evolve either your style or your abilities. And so there'll be times where I'll think maybe depending on what's happening in the scene, I can try something new. And I think that's an important part of growth. I think that it's consistency is very important when making comics, but I also think that doing what inspires you in the moment is is a key part in growing as a creator. And if you're making your own comics, you can take liberties that you might not otherwise have with the artistic approach and take advantage of the fact that it's your project. So really push the creativity behind what you're doing. So here now I've got some rain effects that I'm bringing into the piece because during this scene the sprinkler systems have went off and it's caused a downpour, which contributes to the electric shock that they're all receiving. So the approach here is just to create as near a realistic look of rain that I can and utilize everything at my disposal to help create that effect. So I have kind of a scatter brush there that shows the water droplets kind of splattering around. And this is all to help really create that effect. And this is, again, something that I use for the first time on this page. This is just more exploration and experimentation. And I'm prepping everything for the lighting that I'm going to have to add. I want to make sure that that really is the standout component to this page. This is going to be the turning page. So once you flip the page, this is the first thing you'll see. And I really want it to stand out what's happening. And again, when you're making comics, every time you're doing anything, you always have to make sure that it has a purpose. You got to make sure that you're clearly getting your point across. And the point of this page was to show these men getting electrocuted. I want it to be the focal point. I want it to be what draws the reader's attention. So now that we've had the build up from the roughs into the lines, now to the renders, the opportunity to really show some cool effects and detail have arrived, and that's what I'm doing now. And it's what really brings the final page together. This is this final treatment. And in wrapping up, I like to look back at it, make sure that it serves its purpose, that makes sure that the page really tells the story. And that, in a nutshell, is what it all comes down to. Telling a piece of that story in a page. Well, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed my take on making a page of a comic book. And you can follow all my comic books at mindcorecomics.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Melanshek Nick and on Facebook as well. I plan to make some more videos to show any other processes. Maybe I'll do a lettering one. But I look forward to hearing what you guys think. And I hope it helped you in making comic books. Thanks again, and thanks for watching.